Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot, as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. Elara knelt, Elder Willowbrook's hands, weathered by decades of wisdom, a light anchor on her shoulders. The cottage air, usually a balm of dried herbs and wood smoke, did little to soothe her frayed nerves. Tonight, the looming full moon ceremony, the potential cementing of her bond with Ronin, hung heavy. Or the alternative. Willowbrook's eyes, filmed with age, possessed an uncanny perceptiveness. The moon sways the ocean's child and the soul. Its influence will be potent tonight. Ground yourself. Elara's throat tightened, impeding speech. I'm uncertain of what awaits me, Elder. A knowing smile touched Willowbrook's lips. Expect nothing, Elara, and disappointment finds no purchase. Hope by all means, but tether it to your own resilience, not another's caprice. Ronin carries a crushing weight, capable of warping even the most steadfast spirit. He spurned me. Elara breathed, the words still sharp despite the passage of days. Before everyone. He denied the bond's public acknowledgement, Willowbrook corrected. A distinction worth noting. The bond is a truth etched into your core. Rejection of public declaration does not erase destiny. Remember your value, Elara Meadowlight. You are more than a prospective mate. You are a singular force. She removed her hands, framing Elara's face, thumbs gently caressing her cheekbones. Look deeper, child. Glimpse the fear clouding his gaze, the inner turmoil that rends him. Grant him grace, not for his benefit, but for your own liberation. Unforgiveness is a slow-acting venom. Elara stilled, absorbing the elder's counsel. Forgiveness felt impossibly distant, not because Ronin was undeserving, but because she questioned her own deserving of such pain. To be so openly humiliated, her deepest hopes decimated yet, the elder's words resonated. Clinging to resentment was self-inflicted harm. Opening her eyes, a newfound determination flickered. Thank you, Elder Willowbrook. I shall endeavor. Willowbrook nodded, satisfied. Go now. Prepare yourself. Tonight marks not merely Ronin's fate, but your own ascent into destiny. Leaving the sanctuary, Elara headed towards her own humble abode, the sinking sun painting elongated shadows across the village. The atmosphere thrummed with expectancy, a palpable blend of pine and damp earth filling her senses. Her dwelling, upon entry, felt simultaneously familiar and alien. How could she face the pack after such a spectacle? How could she possibly stand before Ronin and feign indifference to his devastating rejection? A dress lay poised on her bed, a simple, sylvan green silk chosen by her friends for the ceremony. Exquisite, refined, and entirely inappropriate for the desolate creature she felt herself to be. Yet, the soft fabric ignited a spark of defiance. She would not shrink. She would not allow Ronin's choices to define her existence. She would confront the pack with unwavering resolve, demonstrating that Elara Meadowlight defied pity. As she adorned herself, Ronin occupied her thoughts. Those once powerful, obsidian eyes had betrayed something akin to pain that night regret. She couldn't discern. The memory of their private moments, the tenderness in his touch, now felt like a calculated deception. Was any of it sincere? Had she fabricated the connection? She secured the final fastening, her hands betraying a slight tremor. She clung to the belief that something tangible resonated between them, regardless of Ronin's trepidation. The bond they shared had to be more resilient than his aversion to responsibility. Inhaling deeply, she stepped outside. The moon, a silver coin in the twilight, already graced the horizon. Torches illuminated the path to the gathering, their flames pirouetting in the breeze. Jasper Thorne stood sentinel near the forest's edge, his normally impassive face creased with concern. He offered a curt nod. Ilara reciprocated, drawing a modicum of comfort from his quiet support. He knew Ronin intimately, implying a complexity she hadn't fully grasped. The pack formed a vast circle, faces tilted toward the luminary ascent. A sea of yearning eyes, mirroring her own anxieties and expectations. Her friends' faces conveyed worry, offering silent encouragement to remain strong. The clearing shimmered under a lunar glaze, casting elongated, shifting shadows. The air crackled with charged anticipation, silence punctuated solely by rustling leaves and an occasional owl's call. Where was Ronin? The Alpha invariably led the gathering, his presence radiating command and reassurance. His absence intensified the growing unease. As the moon ascended, a profound hush descended. All eyes fixed on the forest's perimeter, anticipating the Alpha's arrival. Ilara's heart hammered, a tempest of apprehension and anticipation brewing inside. Would he appear? Would he acknowledge the bond? Or would he inflict another devastating blow, extinguishing all embers of hope? The extended silence became almost unbearable. Precisely when Ilara reached her breaking point, a figure materialized from the umbra. Ronin, his form a stark silhouette against the celestial glow. His movements possessed a fluid grace that belied his imposing physique, each stride exuding raw power. He moved deliberately towards the circle's center, his gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd. Briefly, his eyes met hers, and a flicker of something remorse, longing, crossed his countenance. Then, his features solidified, resuming their stoic composure. He halted before the ancient oak, the designated venue for the Alpha's address during the full moon ceremony. He stood erect, the burden of his station etched into his very being. The pack waited, suspended breath, for his pronouncements. The fate of the community, and, perhaps, Ilara's heart, teetered. The atmosphere vibrated with suppressed emotion. The whisper of wind through the canopy carried the weight of expectation, and a silent plea for resolution. Shattered vows, a charged stillness gripped the clearing as Ronin entered. All eyes riveted on him, breaths suspended. He moved with a predator's fluid grace. His gaze, dark as a moonless night, swept the assembled pack, pausing almost imperceptibly on Ilara before solidifying into something impenetrable. The forest's aroma of evergreens and wet soil infused his presence, sharpened by the ozone tang of his barely leashed power. He was a spectacle, raw potential straining against the confines of a human frame. Ilara's heart, a hopeful sparrow moments before, threatened to shatter her ribs. He ascended the time-worn stone dais where generations of Alphas had stood, his scrutiny encompassing every face. Firelight danced within his irises, lending them the appearance of embers glowing in the dark. He resembled a sovereign assessing his realm, and Ilara felt diminished, awaiting his decree. Silence descended, a palpable weight pressing down on them. Even the breeze seemed to falter. Ronin remained mute for a prolonged moment, the tension coiling tighter with each heartbeat. Ilara felt a shiver traverse her spine, a dark presentiment looming. She reasoned it away as simple nerves, the culmination of weeks consumed by anxiety. At last, Ronin's voice, a deep resonant timbre, carried to the periphery of the gathering. "Tonight, we honor the full moon, a symbol of our collective strength, our unity, and the unyielding ties that bind us. He hesitated, his gaze traveling across the faces before him, resting briefly on Elder Willowbrook, whose expression remained an enigma at the edge of the circle. "It is also a night for candor," Ronin amplified, his tone sharpening. "A time when difficult choices must be faced for the betterment of all." Ilara's gut clenched. His pronouncements were heavy, freighted with a significance she desperately wished to avoid. She searched his features for any vestige of affection, a hint of their once shared intimacy, but saw only a frozen, unreadable mask. He inhaled deeply, his chest expanding with the breath before uttering the words that would unravel her world. "I have reached a conclusion regarding the bond presented by the elders." The pronouncement hung in the air, each word a blow against Ilara's hopes. He paused, his eyes colliding with hers for a fleeting instant, and in that fraction of a second, she glimpsed something perhaps regret, or a shared agony, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "She is not my mate." The declaration echoed across the clearing, amplified by the ensuing stunned silence. Time seemed to fracture, each second a shard of glass. The fire's crackle seemed strangely distant, muffled. Ilara stood paralyzed, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of his denial. The color leached from her face, leaving her ashen and trembling. A hand closed around her arm, a grounding anchor in the vortex of her despair. It was Jasper, his features a study in concern. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He simply squeezed, his eyes conveying a potent mix of compassion and incredulity. The pack was a panorama of shocked faces. Murmurs began to spread, like the whisper of wind through dry grasses. Ilara couldn't decipher the words, but she felt the collective weight of their judgment, their pity. She longed to vanish, to dissolve into the earth and escape their gazes. Ronin remained on the platform, his expression unchanging. He offered no explanation, no solace. He simply stood, the alpha, resolute in his decision. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Finally, a voice dared to pierce it. A young wolf, barely a man, blurted out, "But the ceremony? The elders' decree?" Ronin's eyes glinted dangerously. "The elders were misinformed," he stated, his voice clipped. "I respect their wisdom, but they were wrong. There is no bond between Ilara Meadowlight and myself, nor will there ever be." Ilara gasped, the sound swallowed by the murmuring crowd. She felt as if she'd been struck, the force of his rejection stealing the air from her lungs. Her vision swam, and the clearing began to tilt. Jasper tightened his grip, his knuckles bone-white. "Ilara, are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with apprehension. She shook her head, unable to articulate a response. Her throat constricted. Her chest ached with suppressed emotion. The humiliation was a crushing weight, suffocating her. How foolish, how naive she had been to entertain the notion that Ronin might reciprocate her feelings. She had allowed herself to dream, to envision a future that would never materialize. Ronin continued, his voice resonating with authority. "This matter is concluded. It is not open for debate. The pack will abide by my decision." He surveyed them, his gaze daring dissent. None came. Ilara wrenched her arm from Jasper's grasp. She couldn't endure being touched, being pitied. She needed to escape, to flee the suffocating atmosphere of the clearing. She turned and bolted, running blindly into the forest, tears blurring her vision. The trees became a blur, their branches snagging at her clothing, mirroring the lacerations in her heart. She was heedless of her direction, driven only by the need to find sanctuary, to grieve in solitude. Behind her, she could discern the faint sounds of the ceremony resuming, the drums throbbing, voices rising in chant. The pack would move on, would consign her to oblivion, but she would never forget this night. The night her heart shattered before them all. The night Ronin Blackwood spurned her, publicly and irrevocably. Jasper watched Elara disappear into the shadows, his own face etched with concern. He glanced back at Ronin, still on the platform, his expression a carefully constructed blank. Something felt amiss. He knew Ronin too deeply. He knew of the conflict raging beneath the composed surface, the war between duty and desire. He refused to believe that Ronin could so easily dismiss the connection he had shared with Elara, the undeniable spark that had kindled between them. He cut through the crowd, ignoring the curious stares and hushed whispers. He had to confront Ronin, to understand the rationale behind this. He mounted the platform, his eyes locking on Ronin's. "What in God's name was that?" Jasper demanded, his voice low with urgency. "You saw the way she looks at you, Ronin. How could you inflict that on her?" Ronin's jaw flexed. "I did what was required," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "Required? What's required about gutting her spirit in front of the entire pack?" Jasper countered, his voice rising in volume. "You know she loves you. You felt the pull as much as she did. You're sacrificing your own happiness for some warped sense of obligation." Ronin turned away, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the trees. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Then enlighten me," Jasper pressed. "Tell me why you did this, why you rejected her." Ronin remained mute for a long, tense moment, his shoulders rigid. Finally he spoke, his voice laced with a world-weariness that belied his youth. "There are things you are unaware of, Jasper, things that would place Elara in grave peril. I acted as I had to in order to safeguard her." Jasper stared at him, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Safeguard her? By publicly humiliating her? That defies all logic." Ronin shook his head, his expression bleak. "It's the sole path," he insisted. "Trust me, Jasper. This is for the best. For her sake, and for the pack's." Jasper yearned to believe him, but something in Ronin's eyes spoke of withheld truths. There was more to this tableau, something obscured beneath the surface drama, and he was determined to unearth it. He had seen the naked vulnerability in Ronin's expression when he thought he was unobserved. He was sure his friend was suffering too. He was beginning to sense that what had transpired was only the opening act. Flight into darkness, the forest floor rushed beneath Elara's frantic steps, a disorienting blur of shed leaves and soaked soil. Every footfall was a panicked attempt to distance herself from the echoing condemnation, the crushing weight of Ronin's dismissal a tangible ache in her breast. Briars clawed at her dress, ripping the fine material, but she ignored them, focused solely on fleeing the suffocating boundaries of the pack territory. The moon, a pitiless observer to her disgrace, cast elongated, grotesque shadows that mimicked the chaotic storm within her mind. Tears blinded her, yet she dared not pause, dared not glance back. The scent of pine and wet earth, once a comforting familiarity, was now poisoned by the searing memory of Ronin's pronouncement. She recalled a time when this wood was her refuge, a haven of shared secrets and boundless liberty. As a child, newly inducted into the pack after her parents' tragic demise, she had sought solace in its depths. The pack, wary of an outsider, had maintained a cautious distance, their gazes a mix of pity and distrust. But the forest had embraced her, its ancient sentinels offering silent camaraderie. She remembered one particularly brutal winter when dwindling supplies had the elders murmuring about strict rationing. She, small and unnoticed, had discovered a concealed copse of late-season berries, enough to augment the pack's meager stores for weeks. She'd presented her discovery to Alpha Theron, Ronin's father, her heart hammering with trepidation and anticipation. He had regarded her, his eyes softening with unexpected warmth, and for the first time she felt truly integrated. That warmth was a faded memory now, eclipsed by the glacial sting of rejection. Ronin, the boy who had shared those berries with her, the boy who had vowed to defend her, had publicly disavowed her. How could he? The question tore at her throat, a silent scream struggling for release. Each whisper of foliage, each crackle underfoot, sounded like his voice, taunting her, reminding her of her perceived worthlessness. She drove herself harder, her lungs ablaze, her muscles screaming in protest. The trees closed in, the undergrowth thickened, as she plunged deeper into the uncharted wilderness bordering the packlands. She didn't know her destination, didn't care. Only escape mattered, oblivion, anything to quell the excruciating agony. A memory surfaced suddenly, a brief reprieve from the all-consuming despair. Jasper. Amidst the suspicious glances and hushed judgments of her early days in the pack, Jasper had extended a simple act of kindness. She had struggled to master the pack's time-honored hunting techniques, her slight build a hindrance. The other young wolves had jeered, their taunts echoing across the training ground. Mortified, she had retreated to the forest's edge, tears welling in her eyes. Jasper had followed, not with pity, but with empathy. He had demonstrated an alternative approach, a subtle adjustment in technique that leveraged her agility and strategic thinking. "Strength isn't always about brute force, Ilara," he had said gently. "Sometimes it's about finding a cleverer way." His words, his steadfast faith in her, ignited a tiny spark of hope within the oppressive darkness. But hope proved ephemeral, swiftly quenched by the weight of her present reality. Ronin's repudiation had not just wounded her heart, it had challenged her very self. No longer was she Ilara Meadowlight, potential Luna, respected member of the pack. She was Ilara Meadowlight, the rejected, the outcast, the deemed unworthy. Finally, her strength deserted her. Staggering blindly, she tripped on a protruding root and collapsed onto the ground, the impact sending a wave of pain through her already pounding head. She lay there, sprawled upon the cold earth, the tears finally spent, replaced by a profound emptiness. Above, the moon maintained its silent watch, its spectral glow illuminating a secluded clearing, a secret haven untouched by the turmoil of the world beyond. She curled into a fetal position, drawing her knees toward her chest, her body shaking uncontrollably. The forest, once her haven, now felt detached, its silence amplifying her isolation. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. The weight of her sorrow was unbearable, suffocating, threatening to devour her completely. As the first fingers of dawn began to breach the canopy, streaking the sky with shades of ash and violet, Ilara remained in the clearing, motionless, her spirit fractured, her future indistinct. The forest held its breath, waiting, observing, as the discarded she-wolf prepared to confront a world that no longer resembled home. She didn't know what the days ahead would bring, but one thing was indisputable. The Ilara who had fled into the forest last night was gone, replaced by someone more hardened, more guarded, someone forever marked by the Alpha's cruel decree. The path ahead would be long and arduous, a descent into shadow, but somewhere, buried within her injured heart, a flicker of defiance persisted, a refusal to be utterly extinguished. She would endure. She must. For herself, if for no one else. Whispers and shadows the sunrises blurred, each dawn a faint imitation of the one before. Ilara's cottage, once vibrant with life, now echoed the desolation within her. Sunlight, filtering through dusty panes, spotlighted the idle loom, the untouched books, the overgrown herbs outside, the pervasive scent of lavender and chamomile, formerly a comfort, now felt suffocating. A constant nudge of what was lost. Her days dissolved into a fog of sorrow, punctuated by sharp, fleeting visions Ronin's hand in hers, bursts of laughter, quiet fireside moments. Now, spectral memories. They haunted the edges of her awareness. Journeys beyond her doorstep became rare, each step tentative, her gaze fixed on the ground. The woods, once a solace, now felt like hostile territory. She sensed the judging eyes, the murmurs that trailed her like a persistent draft. Worthless, they breathed, cast aside, flawed. The words cut deeper than any blade, scarring her spirit. In her mind's eye, she saw their pitying looks, their self-righteous approval. They'd always considered her an outsider, tolerated but never embraced. Ronin's denial merely confirmed their pre-existing biases. One afternoon, while gathering vervain, Ilara overheard pack members gossiping by the creek. "Did you see her face at the choosing?" "Ready to crumble?" a woman snickered, her tone dripping with unkindness. Ronin did the only thing he could. Another voice interjected. "He requires a robust mate, someone to produce strong offspring." Ilara was always too fragile. Ilara's grip tightened on the vervain roots, bruising the leaves. An urge to shout, to retaliate, to defend her worth surged within her. But she remained still, unseen in the dense undergrowth, her heart aching with that familiar sting. Any response, she knew, would only stoke their flames, validate their skewed perceptions. Retreating to her haven, she carried their words like a physical burden. She tossed the herbs carelessly onto the table and sank onto the worn rug before the cold hearth. The emptiness of the space pressed in on her. Clasping her arms around herself, she attempted to ward off the chill that had taken root deep within. A soft tapping resonated through the small house. Ilara started, her pulse racing. She hadn't had a caller since that fateful day. She paused, hesitant to respond. But the knocking persisted, gentle, yet insistent. With a sigh that felt older than her years, she opened the portal. Standing before her was Elder Willowbrook. Her face, a map of time and wisdom, remained placid, her gaze filled with a gentle understanding. In her grip, she held a small hand-woven basket. "Ilara," she said softly, her tone like the murmur of leaves in the wind. "May I enter?" Surprised, Ilara stepped to the side. "Elder Willowbrook," she stammered. "Of course. Please, come in." Willowbrook entered, her presence filling the small space with a sense of quiet grace. With a perceptive gaze, she absorbed the room, noting the dusty surfaces, the untouched loom, the pervading sense of gloom. "You've not been well, child," she observed, her tone kind but firm. Ashamed, Ilara cast her gaze downwards. I've not been feeling myself," she mumbled. Willowbrook placed the basket on the table. "I've brought you tea," she said. "A blend of lavender and chamomile, to ease your heart." She began unpacking the basket, revealing a small teapot, 2 delicate china cups, and a packet of dried herbs. Watching her, Ilara felt a rising sense of bewilderment. "Why are you here, Elder?" she asked. "Surely you have more pressing concerns than a rejected mate." Willowbrook paused, her eyes meeting Ilara's directly. "Rejection holds no power to define you, child," she responded softly. "It is but a single thread woven within the tapestry of your existence. And even the darkest hearts can lend depth and artistry to the whole." She filled the teapot from the kettle and set it upon the hearth to warm. "But Ronin," Ilara began, her voice cracking. "He said he declared I wasn't his mate. He cast me aside before the entire pack." Willowbrook nodded, her expression unwavering. "I know the words he spoke, Ilara. But words are merely that, words. Their power is only as great as the strength you grant them." She seated herself on a stool near the hearth, gesturing for Ilara to join her. Hesitantly, Ilara sat opposite the elder. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Finally, Willowbrook spoke. "Ronin bears a substantial responsibility, Ilara," she said. "The weight of leadership. He is young, still learning the intricate dance of his position. He made an election, a demanding one, perhaps even for flawed reasons." "What do you mean?" Ilara inquired, her voice barely audible. "The Alpha's first consideration must always be the welfare of the pack," Willowbrook clarified. "He must select a mate who strengthens the bond, who promises to bolster its prospects for survival. At times, personal fulfillment must acquiesce to the needs of the collective. So you're saying he holds no affection for me?" Ilara asked, her eyes brimming with tears. Willowbrook reached out, enfolding Ilara's hand in hers, her touch surprisingly strong. "I am suggesting that love is a labyrinth of complexities, Ilara," she responded. "It is rarely straightforward or painless, and at times it simply isn't sufficient." She poured the tea into the fragile cups, offering one to Ilara. "Drink," she said. "Allow its warmth to alleviate your pain." Ilara took a sip, the familiar fragrance permeating her senses. While soothing, it couldn't penetrate the core of coldness that resided within her. "I don't grasp this," she said. "If his concern for the pack is so profound, why does he continue? Looking at me? Why linger near my cottage? He knows I suffer, yet remains passive." Willowbrook sighed. "He is divided, Ilara. Trapped between duty and desire. He yearns for you, yet believes he cannot possess you." "Then he should leave me to my peace," Ilara said, her voice hardening with resolve. "Allow me to move ahead." Willowbrook offered a slow nod. "Perhaps that is what is needed," she agreed. "But whether it will transpire remains to be seen. The heart is a resolute entity, Ilara. It often resists the dictates of logic." They remained quiet for some time, the soft sound of the flickering hearth the sole accompaniment. Ilara sipped her tea, feeling a fragile tendril of warmth unfurl within her. Willowbrook's presence was a balm, a reminder that she wasn't utterly forsaken in her affliction. As the sun commenced its descent, painting long shadows across the room, Willowbrook arose. "I must depart now, child," she said. "But remember this. You are resilient, Ilara. More so than you acknowledge. Do not permit this rejection to destroy you. Let it instead strengthen you." She paused to leave and added, her eyes twinkling gently. "And one last thought," she spoke. "Do not underestimate the liberating essence of forgiveness. It is a treasure you bestow upon yourself, not necessarily the other." With that, she stepped out into the twilight, leaving Ilara alone. But this time, the silence felt distinct, no longer the quiet of utter despair, but rather of introspection. Willowbrook's words echoed in her mind, implanting a seed of hope in the parched landscape of her inner world. The whispers of the group still lingered, yet their venom no longer held such dominion. Ilara remained wounded, still overwhelmed with confusion, but a flicker of resistance had been ignited. She would not be defined by Ronin's rejection. She would chart her own trajectory, discover her own fortitude, and perhaps, in due course, even find her own joy. A night of begging the scraping at the door was less a request, more a violation. Not the gentle nudge of a stray seeking warmth, but a frantic assault, a sound that burrowed into Ilara's marrow. A visceral alarm that bypassed reason and clenched at her gut. She recognized the signature even before her fingers grazed the latch. The aroma, a potent blend of pine wood and dewy earth, laced with a feral undercurrent, had already permeated the meager dwelling. Ronin, a hesitation, her hand hovering over the frigid metal. Elder Willowbrook's counsel echoed. Compassion, fortitude. Yet clemency felt like an unattainable indulgence, and inner strength, a distant glimmer. She eased the portal a hair's breadth, peering through the narrow opening. The vision that met her stripped the air from her lungs. This wasn't Ronin the Alpha, the collected sovereign who addressed the pack with unwavering command. It was a lichen, a magnificent, agonizing figure of sheer brawn and shadow, with amber eyes blazing with a fervor that mirrored the tempest within her own core. He was colossal, dwarfing any wolf she had encountered, his pelt the hue of a moonless night, and his breath plumed in the frigid air. But it was the sound, a keening lament that unraveled her entirely. He shifted then, the metamorphosis a torturous ballet of snapping cartilage and reforming bone. Ilara recoiled, reflexively reaching out as if to intercede against the pain. When he stood before her, unclad and exposed, the Alpha's mask had fallen away. Torment sculpted his features, his eyes were bloodshot, and his physique trembled. With leashed potency. "Ilara?" he croaked, his voice a ravaged whisper, a far cry from the authoritative cadence she knew. She remained rooted, her grip tight on the door, finding a fragile defense. "What is it you want, Ronin?" Her voice, barely audible, masked the chaos churning within. He edged closer, prompting her to flinch, her spine pressing into the timber frame. The space between them thrummed with unspoken longings, with the unbridled force of their connection, a bond he had so publicly renounced. I can't," he faltered, raking a hand through his tangled mane. "I can't keep away." "You charted your course, Ronin," she retorted, her voice hardening, each word a shield forged in pain. "You prioritized your duty over me, over us." "Duty," he spat the word as though it were venom. "It's a prison, Ilara. A gilded one, perhaps, but a prison nonetheless." "And you elected to imprison yourself," she rejoined, her gaze flashing. "Do not come here now, pleading for what you discarded." He sank to his knees, the proud Alpha, the figure of dread, kneeling before her in the dirt. "Please, Ilara. Just one night. One night to explain everything. One night to hold you close." The petition pierced her defenses, conjuring memories of shared laughter, whispered intimacies, the intoxicating comfort of his embrace. She longed to reach out, to enfold him, to lose herself in the familiar sanctuary of his arms. But the recollection of his dismissal, of the pack's derisive glances, held her caught, captive. "Explain what, Ronin?" she queried, her voice trembling despite her resolve. Explain how you stood there, looked me in the eye, and disavowed our bond? Explain how you abandoned me to face the pack's condemnation alone." He bowed his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I cannot divulge everything, Ilara. Not yet. But I pledge to you it was not as it appeared. It was not a rejection of you. It was a necessary evil." "A necessary evil?" she scoffed. "And what was I? The sacrificial lamb? The tribute to appease some ancient deity?" He looked up, his eyes brimming with desperate supplication. "No, Ilara. You are everything to me. You always have been. That is why this is so agonizing." "Then why, Ronin? Why did you do it?" He hesitated, his jaw clenched. "I cannot say." "Not yet. But please, grant me your belief when I tell you that I was left with no alternative. The pack, they are imperiled, and I had to act in their defense." "And what of me?" she inquired, her voice fracturing. "Am I not a part of the pack? Am I not worth defending?" "You are," he asserted, his voice thick with emotion. "You are worth more than defending. You are worth fighting for. But I cannot wage this battle single-handedly, Ilara. I need your faith just a little longer." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, hesitant to make contact. His fingers were hardened, roughened from years of practice and authority, yet she recalled their tender touch, the manner in which they could ignite a conflagration within her with the merest graze. "One night, Ilara," he implored, his voice barely audible. "One night to demonstrate the depth of my feelings for you. One night to prove that my actions were not a reflection of my affection." She scrutinized him, her mind in turmoil. A part of her yearned to slam the door shut, to expunge him from her existence permanently. Yet another faction, the one that still craved his touch, the one that still clung to the bond they shared, offered a different response. The night was frigid, the wind howling through the boughs, mirroring the upheaval raging within her. She peered into his eyes, seeking any trace of deceit, any indication of falsehood. Yet all she discerned was anguish and a fervent, unwavering devotion. One night, she conceded at last, her voice a mere exhalation. "But that is all you will receive, Ronin. One night to persuade me that you are worthy of absolution. One night to demonstrate that you have not annihilated everything we possessed." He closed his eyes momentarily, a wave of relief washing over his face. He reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers, and gently drew her toward him. "Thank you, Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You shall not regret this." He stepped inside, saturating the small cottage with his essence, his scent, his raw, feral energy. Ilara pushed the door closed behind him, sealing out the world, and turned to confront the wolf who had disavowed her in public, now begging for her compassion in private. The night lay ahead, and the battle for her heart had only just begun. Conflicted hearts, the air in Ilara's small cottage vibrated with suppressed emotion, a palpable tension like the electric charge before a storm. Ronin had been taciturn since entering, his presence a perplexing blend of familiar solace and devastating betrayal. Restrained energy coiled within him like a trapped wolf. He scanned the room, his gaze, usually so keen, now reflecting her own haunted bewilderment. Firelight flickered, painting fleeting expressions of vulnerability on his weathered face as Ilara's heart hammered in her chest. She'd conceded this night, this precarious truce, yet struggled to reconcile the man before her with the one who had so publicly scorned her. Was it manipulation? A trial she was doomed to fail? Or did a lurking darkness, as he claimed, truly exist beyond her grasp? He finally pivoted to face her, the silence stretching, a wire pulled to its breaking point. "Ilara," he began, his voice a husky rasp that resonated deep within her. He reached out, his hand hovering tentatively near her cheek, uncertain of its welcome. She recoiled instinctively, a response etched by weeks of anguish and shame. The rejection still stung, a festering wound beneath her carefully constructed composure. "Please, don't," she managed, her voice a mere thread against the crackling hearth. "Don't offer hollow words." His hand fell, his shoulders slumping ever so slightly. "I mean everything," he insisted, his gaze burning into hers. "Whatever feeling I bear for you is immutable, Ilara, my only constant." The words were a soothing balm on her soul, yet simultaneously fanned the flames of her confusion. If his sentiments ran true, what was the motivation behind the deception? The public denouncement that had, in effect, exiled her. "Then clarify this for me, Ronin," she implored, her voice laced with frustration. "Unravel this. Tell me why you subjected me to that. Tell me why you eviscerated me before our entire community." He turned away, traversing the limited space. The fragrance of pine and rain-soaked earth clung to him, a primordial aroma that both allured and repelled her. He raked a hand through his dark hair, the gesture exposing a weariness that etched years onto his countenance. "I cannot," he conceded at last, his voice thick with a muted anguish. "Not yet. The intricacies are immense." "Immense?" Ilara scoffed, the word dripping with corrosive sarcasm. "Is that your descriptor? I call it treachery. I call it humiliation. I call it—" Her voice crumbled, the tears she had so fiercely fought back threatening to crest. He faced her again, his eyes laden with desperate appeal. Closing the span between them, he cupped her face, his touch gentle, reverent. "Please, Ilara," he breathed, his thumbs tenderly erasing the errant tears. "Simply have faith in me, just tonight." His proximity was an irresistible pull, a siren's call she was helpless against. The familiar warmth of his touch, the evocative scent of his skin, the searing intensity of his regard, it all drew her back to that realm where reason dissolved and raw emotion reigned. She knew it was imprudent, a dangerous game, yet she couldn't deny the ravenous longing that consumed her. And so she yielded. Not entirely, not without qualms, but yielded none. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she allowed herself to be swept away by the undercurrent of their shared past. The night that followed was a montage of bittersweet moments, of murmured confessions and fervent embraces. Their kisses held a desperate ferocity, their bodies clinging as if trying to meld together. They reminisced, recounted shared aspirations of the future they had once envisioned, a future that now felt impossibly remote. Yet, intertwined with the ardor and tenderness was a current of sorrow, a haunting awareness of the abyss that had cleaved them asunder. As the first streaks of dawn filtered through the window, bathing the room in a soft, ethereal glow, they lay entwined in the aftermath of their lovemaking. Ilara traced the topography of Ronin's face with her fingertips, committing every contour, every scar to memory. This could not endure, she realized. Soon, the cold truths of their predicament would come crashing down around them. But for this ephemeral moment of intimacy, she dared to entertain the notion that hope yet remained. "Ronin," she murmured, her voice raspy with emotion. "Tell me the truth. Do you lament it?" He was silent, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, his expression unreadable. Eventually, he turned, his eyes reflecting a pain that mirrored her own. "Lament what, Ilara?" he queried, his voice a bare breath. "Regret my love for you? Regret my attempts to safeguard you? Regret everything that has transpired?" She scrutinized his face, seeking validation, any glimpse of his honest sentiments. "Just to tell me the truth," she begged. He sighed, a heavy, weary exhalation. "The truth is," he finally said, his voice choked with emotion, "I no longer know." The declaration hung in the air, weighty and unresolved. Ilara's eyes fluttered shut, a solitary tear tracing a path down her temple. The night had reached its conclusion. The enchantment had dissipated, and the unyielding reality of their conflicted hearts persisted. In the wan morning light, Ronin slipped from the bed, his movements deliberate, almost contrite. He dressed swiftly, his back to Ilara, the silence a heavy shroud. He paused at the door, his hand hovering over the latch, and cast a final glance in her direction. Their eyes connected, a silent exchange of yearning and regret. Then, without a single word, he vanished. Ilara remained in bed, her gaze fixed on the vacant space beside her. The lingering scent of Ronin hung in the air, a bittersweet echo of the night they had shared. She could not remain here, immersed in her suffering. She needed clarification. She needed to decipher what was propelling Ronin, what was forcing him to make such untenable choices. And so, she resolved to cease being a mere pawn. She would wrest control of her destiny. She would uncover the truth, regardless of the cost. She rose, a newfound resolve surging through her. The sun ascended, painting the horizon with strokes of gold. A new day was commencing, and Ilara Meadowlight was braced to confront it. Guardian of the border damp earth cushioned Ilara's boots, the sharp tang of pine and humus replacing the packland's stifling atmosphere of whispers and pity. Here, at the boundary, her lungs expanded with something akin to hope. The worn quiver shifted against her back, its weight a familiar anchor. Archery, once a mere outlet, now served as a lifeline. She was no longer just Ilara Meadowlight, the rejected mate. She was a shield. The elders, initially taken aback by her request for border duty, had resisted. A woman, particularly one freshly marked by heartbreak, on the front lines. Unthinkable. Yet Ilara stood firm, her voice imbued with unexpected steel, a flicker of defiance rekindled in her eyes. She argued her intimate knowledge of the woods, honed during countless wanderings with Ronin. The unspoken hung between them, her desperate need to reclaim herself from the ruins of his rejection. They yielded, assigning her to Gareth's patrol, a seasoned warrior cloaked in a gruff demeanor that belied a surprising depth of compassion. Gareth, initially scrutinizing, had dispensed with all gentleness, instead pushing her relentlessly. He honed her skills in tracking, scent discernment, and combat until her muscles screamed and her mind sharpened. He treated her as any other recruit, a stock rigger she craved. Today she walked alone, a privilege earned after weeks of unwavering dedication. Sunlight filtered through the high branches, painting fleeting mosaics on the ground. She moved with newfound resolve, senses heightened. Her gaze swept the canopy for fractured limbs, her ears strained for the telltale snap of foreign twigs, her nostrils flared, seeking an alien scent. It didn't take long. A whisper of metallic tang, barely perceptible beneath the forest's rich bouquet, reached her. Blood. Aged, yet undeniably blood. Ilara followed the thread, her hand instinctively finding the shaft of an arrow. She advanced silently, her steps barely ruffling the fallen leaves. The source lay near a stream, a churned patch of earth, the soil stained a deep rust. Wolf prints, larger and more aggressive than those of her pack, marred the mud. Rogue wolves, or worse, trespassers from the Northwood pack. Trouble simmered. Ilara knelt, studying the imprints. They were recent, at most a day old. This wasn't a stray's wanderings but a deliberate incursion. The Northwood pack had been testing their borders for months, probing their defenses. Minor clashes had erupted, but nothing substantial. Until now, perhaps. An icy premonition slithered down her spine, yet she cast it aside. Fear served no purpose. Responsibility weighed upon her. She needed to report this. As she rose, a gleam of metal snagged her attention. Half buried under decaying leaves lay a roughly hewn blade, its grip bound in weathered leather. Not the work of a vagrant. This was a Northwood weapon. She lifted it, the cold steel a weighty presence in her palm. The Northwood pack, notorious for its ferocity and ruthlessness, wouldn't hesitate to spill blood to claim dominance. Her fingers tightened around the hilt. What did they seek? More territory? Scarcer resources? Or some other covetous prize? As she examined the blade, fragments of memory assailed her. Ronin should have been here, leading the patrols, safeguarding his people. But he was absent, withdrawn, his spirit dimmed by some unseen torment. A hollow laugh escaped her lips. He'd cast her aside, shattering their bond for some inscrutable reason. And now, while he grappled with his demons, she stood guard over their homeland. The irony stung. She recalled their forest nights, when he had taught her the art of tracking, the skill of the hunt, the wisdom of survival. He'd shown her constellations, whispering legends of ancestral wolves. He'd held her close, promising an eternity that now felt like a cruel deception. Forever. The word tasted of ashes. She closed her eyes, fighting the memory's insidious pull. She couldn't afford to succumb to the past. Not now. Not with her pack teetering on the precipice of danger. But the images lingered, refusing to fade. She sought his face, his eyes filled with a love that now seemed a mirage. She heard his voice, whispering her name in the darkness. Why, Ronin? Why did you betray us? The question echoed, unanswered. She embraced duty, responsibility, obligation. She'd lived her existence by the pack's rigid tenets. But she couldn't fathom why his duty demanded the sacrifice of their love. She opened her eyes, her gaze hardening. She wouldn't allow his choices to define her. She wouldn't permit his shadows to consume her. She would forge her own path, unearth her own strength. She would protect her pack, even if he remained unable. Clutching the Northwood blade, she turned back toward the packlands, her heart pounding with a potent cocktail of fear and determination. A warning awaited delivery. A battle demanded preparation. And perhaps, just perhaps, a truth lay waiting to be discovered. The truth about Ronin, and about the encroaching darkness threatening to unravel their world. Shadows gather the forest air, thick with resinous pine, and the musk of wet earth clung to Ilara as she patrolled the boundary. An unsettling quiet had descended, raising gooseflesh on her arms. She halted, inhaling deeply, seeking the source of her anxiety. This wasn't the familiar tang of Northwood wolves, something else lingered, hinting at calculation and intent. From the gloom materialized a figure, slender and imposing, her eyes twin shards of night. Lyra Shadowclaw. The Shadowclaw Alpha's aura of haughty command contrasted sharply with the Blackwood Pack's more grounded presence. Ilara Meadowlight, Lyra murmured, a velvety rasp that sent a chill crawling up Ilara's spine. So vigilant, guarding your precious patch. Ilara squared her shoulders, meeting Lyra's intense gaze unflinchingly. Lyra, far from your usual haunts, aren't you? Lyra's head canted, amusement glinting in her dark eyes. Merely appreciating the landscape. Blackwood's domain feels so sturdy. A strong pack yours is, Ilara. Such a shame about the fissures appearing in its bedrock. Ilara's fingers instinctively tightened on the concealed dagger beneath her tunic. What fissures are you referring to? Lyra chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that carried no mirth. Oh, you know. Rejection's sting. Disappointment's weight. The creeping tendrils of discontent. Things that fester and rot, Ilara. Things that can topple even the most venerable trees. The jab struck home. Ilara's jaw grew rigid, determined not to betray her inner turmoil. Blackwood remains unshaken, stronger than you perceive. Perhaps, Lyra conceded, her eyes narrowing like a predator sighting its prey. But brute force isn't the only weapon, is it? It's about knowing exactly where to apply pressure, when to twist the blade. A touch of leverage. She closed the distance between them, her voice a low murmur. Ronin is a formidable alpha, yes, but even he possesses vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities, Ilara, those are ripe opportunities. Ilara's pulse hammered in her ears. Lyra's thinly veiled threats were unmistakable. This wasn't a mere reconnaissance mission. She was probing for weaknesses, seeking avenues to exploit Blackwood's current unrest. You're wasting your breath, Ilara retorted, striving for a firmness her trembling hands belied. Blackwood stands as one. Lyra's smile widened, revealing a flash of predatory teeth. We shall see, dear Ilara. Perhaps we shall discover if unity can resist the allure of temptation. After all, even the most flawless silver dulls with caw. Age. She paused, adding with deadly sweetness, do convey my warmest regards to Ronin, and my sincere admiration for his unwavering adherence to tradition. With a final lingering stare that promised future conflict, Lyra dissolved back into the shadows, leaving Ilara steeped in the icy residue of her words. The atmosphere now felt oppressively cold, the silence charged with menace. This encounter was far more than a simple border dispute. It was a declaration of war in the making. Lyra was not only ambitious, but also a genuine danger. Ilara spun around and sprinted toward the heart of Blackwood, her boots drumming a frantic rhythm on the earth. She needed to alert Jasper, to impress upon him the gravity of the situation. Lyra's appearance wasn't just a casual warning. It signaled a larger storm gathering on the horizon, one that threatened to tear apart the fragile truce between the packs. She found Jasper in his study, engrossed in territorial maps. He glanced up as she burst into the room, his brow creasing with concern. Ilara, what is it? You look utterly stricken. It's Lyra, Ilara panted, struggling to regain her breath. She was at the border. She issued a veiled threat against Ronin, alluding to exploiting Blackwood's weaknesses. Jasper's gaze sharpened. Lyra? What precisely did she say? Ilara recounted the entire exchange, repeating Lyra's words with precise accuracy, her voice trembling with a mixture of suppressed fury and dread. She spoke of rejection, of discontent, of cracks in our foundation. She claimed Ronin had vulnerabilities, that weaknesses are opportunities. Even mentioned seducing members of the pack into betraying us. I believe she's planning something, Jasper. Something significant. Jasper absorbed the information, his expression steadily darkening. Once she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers before his mouth. Lyra is driven, he stated slowly. More driven than many realize. She's always harbored resentment for Ronin's standing, Blackwood's dominance. She views us as an obstacle. But this felt different, Ilara insisted. It wasn't merely resentment. It felt calculated. As if she's been lying in wait for the opportune moment, and now thinks she's found it in our current disarray. Jasper nodded, his eyes unfocused. The Northwood raid of Ronin's call it's shaken our stability. Lyra recognizes this. She's like a carrion bird, circling above, anticipating our descent. We cannot allow that to happen, Ilara declared, her voice gaining an edge of steel. We must prepare ourselves. We must demonstrate to her that Blackwood is far from the crippled force she envisions. Jasper sighed, running a weary hand through his thinning hair. I am aware, Ilara, but we're already spread thin. The Northwood threat remains very real, and we're struggling to defend our borders as it is. A direct confrontation with Shadowclaw, it could be catastrophic. Doing nothing is far worse, Ilara countered. If we wait for her to make the first move, we'll be caught unprepared. We must be proactive. We must unearth her plans and thwart them before it's too late. Jasper scrutinized her, his eyes reflecting a blend of concern and respect. You are correct, Ilara. Quite correct. My focus on the immediate perils has blinded me to the bigger picture. I owe you my gratitude. He rose to his feet, his shoulders straightening with renewed determination. We must speak with Ronin. He must be made aware of this. He may not wish to hear it, but he requires the facts to understand the gravity of the situation. Ilara's heart plummeted at the mention of Ronin's name. The prospect of facing him again, of enduring the pain of his rejection, felt almost unbearable. But she knew Jasper spoke truth. Ronin was the alpha he deserved, the information, regardless of their complicated history. I will accompany you, she whispered. I want to be present. I want to witness his response. Jasper nodded, his hand briefly clasping her shoulder in silent reassurance. Then let us be on our way. Shadows are thickening, Ilara. We must be ready to meet them head-on. Dismissed warnings the reek of resin and loam trailed Ilara as she entered Ronin's domain, the war room. Its map-covered walls and weapon displays served as constant reminders of his responsibilities. He was hunched over the massive oak table, Jasper beside him, locked in fervent debate, their expressions etched with worry. The air thrummed with unspoken anxieties, almost tangible. Ronin, Ilara announced, her voice a clear bell cutting through their argument. Both men pivoted, their faces shifting from preoccupation to cautious appraisal. Ronin's gaze, as ever, was a fortress, hiding flickers that hinted, achingly, at regret. Ilara, he rumbled, his voice a deep resonance that filled the space. What draws you from your patrol of the western border? I've returned from it, she confirmed, nearing the table, the gravity of her news weighing heavily. I encountered Lyra Shadowclaw. Jasper's features sharpened. The Shadowclaw Alpha? What did she want? Not a parley for trade routes, Jasper. She probed our defenses, tested our mettle, Ilara declared, placing a well-worn map on the table, indicating a vulnerable sector. She spoke of discord, whispered of Blackwood's weaknesses. The message, though veiled, was undeniable. She's contemplating a strike. Ronin bent closer, studying the map, yet Ilara detected a reluctance in his stance, a hesitancy to fully commit. Lyra has always been ambitious. We've long been aware. Her threats rarely materialize. But this felt different, Ronin, Ilara insisted, a tremor of urgency in her tone. She was angling for information. Patrol schedules, warrior availability. She knew of the recent frictions within the pack, the challenges to your leadership. Ronin's jaw clenched. Those are internal affairs. Ilara, we're managing them. Lyra Shadowclaw doesn't concern herself with internal affairs unless she can exploit them, Ilara retorted, frustration coloring her words. She spies opportunity, Ronin a chance. To extend her reach, solidify her dominion. We cannot dismiss this lightly. He straightened, his eyes hardening into chips of flint. I appreciate your concern, Ilara, but I have already factored in the possibility of Shadowclaw. Aggression. We have measures in place. Measures? Ilara echoed, disbelief playing. What measures? Ignoring the smoke until the fire engulfs us? Warriors are stationed along the border, Ronin countered, his voice gaining an edge. Scouts monitor Shadowclaw. Movements. I am not blind to the situation. But are you truly vigilant? Ilara pressed, stepping closer, her voice softening, pleading. Ronin, she knows about the chasm between you and the elders. She knows about the simmering discontent among the younger wolves, the feeling of being unheard. She's preying on our vulnerabilities. Ronin turned away, his gaze fixed on the map, his shoulders tight. The elders will comply. They always do. As for the younger wolves, they need to learn the burdens of leadership, the inevitable sacrifices. Sacrifices like rejecting your mate before the entire pack? Ilara blurted, the words escaping before she could stem the tide. The pain still sharp, the air around them crackled anew, charged with a personal anguish. Jasper shifted, eyes flickering nervously between them. Ronin's face was a mask, control etched into every line. That is irrelevant here. Is it? Ilara shot back, bitterness underscoring her words. Because it feels like everything factors into that decision, Ronin. Your ambition, your sense of duty, your fear of what? Appearing weak? Admitting to emotion? Enough, Ilara. Ronin snapped, a dangerous glint in his eyes. This is neither the time nor the place. When is the time, Ronin? When Lyra Shadowclaw is hammering at our gates? Ilara demanded, her voice trembling, a blend of fury and despair. You are so preoccupied with politics, so consumed by your own internal conflicts, you're blind to the impending doom. I am not blind, Ronin growled, stepping towards her, his presence looming. I face a multitude of threats, Ilara threats you can scarcely imagine. Then enlighten me, Ronin, Ilara challenged, standing her ground. Tell me what occupies you so completely that you overlook Lyra's threat. Tell me why our pack's safety isn't paramount. Ronin remained silent, his gaze locked on hers, a silent battle raging within. Finally, he averted his eyes, his shoulders losing some of their rigidity. That will be all. I will consider your concerns, Ilara. You are dismissed. The words landed, icy and final. Dismissed, as she had been publicly dismissed. The familiar ache returned, a dull throbbing in her chest. Ilara stared at his rigid back for a moment longer, her heart sinking. He wasn't listening. He was so entangled in his own struggles that he couldn't perceive the looming danger. With a sigh that carried the weight of her disappointment, She turned and left the war room, leaving Ronin and Jasper shrouded in silence. The scent of pine and damp earth now felt like a cage, a constant reminder of the pack she had sworn to protect, and the alpha who seemed determined to ignore her warnings. The Shadowclaw attack the wind, redolent of pine needles and moist earth, was a familiar balm to Ilara as she patrolled the eastern boundary. Yet, a disquieting tremor ran beneath the surface, prickling her skin. The sting of Ronin's rebuff lingered, but the Alpha's inexplicable trust in Lyra Shadowclaw troubled her even more. Each rustle in the undergrowth, each snap of a branch, amplified her foreboding. She banished the doubt, anchoring herself to her duty, senses honed, poised to shield her pack, even if its leader remained willfully blind. The assault detonated without preamble, a storm of fur and claws erupting from the dense woods. Guttural snarls, the sounds of wolves shifting on the move, ripped through the air, their eyes gleaming with raw hunger. A calculated offensive. These flanking tactics aimed to crush the border sentries before an alarm could be sounded. Ilara morphed, her wolf a flash of quicksilver, colliding head-on with the lead attacker. The Shadowclaw wolf, unusually large, launched itself forward, fangs bared, but Ilara danced aside, her claws carving a path across its flank. A yelp of agony echoed through the trees as she exploited her edge, driving the aggressor back into the forest's embrace. But this was no isolated scuffle. Across the entire border, the Blackwood patrols were besieged. The shock of the ambush was crippling, throwing the pack into pandemonium. The ululating cries of the wounded tangled with the enraged bellows of the attackers, a jarring symphony of violence. Deep within Blackwood territory, Ronin was locked in a fraught discussion with Jasper, his beta. They debated the growing discontent within the pack, the simmering rebellion fueled by Ronin's recent choices, when the first vibrations of the onslaught reached them. What in the moon goddess name? Jasper's question was swallowed by the unmistakable sounds of war. The grinding of claws, the snarls of wolves locked in a deadly embrace, the chilling lament of the injured. Ronin's features hardened into granite. "Shadowclaw," he rumbled, his voice thick with ire. He had underestimated Lyra, his judgment clouded by inner turmoil. He slammed the fist down, the reverberation shaking the very structure of the room. "Rally the warriors, defend our home." He shifted even as the command left his lips, sable fur cascading across his form as he became the imposing wolf. He exploded from the hall, Jasper right behind him, driven forward by the dire urgency. At the vanguard of the Shadowclaw offensive, Grayson Stone spun a vortex of lethal control. His devotion to Lyra verged on fanaticism, and this invasion was his chance to prove his worth, to cement his standing within her pack. He moved with savage efficiency, his claws rending the Blackwood defenses, his gaze locked on a single objective: Lyra's triumph. He reveled in the bedlam, the electric surge of power coursing through him as he carved a path through the Blackwood warriors. Each fallen wolf became an offering to his queen, a testament to her leadership. He fought with ferocious abandon, compelled by a ravenous need for validation, a burning desire to quell the insecurities that haunted him. Ilara battled with desperate valor, but was hard-pressed by the numbers arrayed against her. The Shadowclaw wolves relentlessly pressed their advantage, driving her back toward the heart of Blackwood lands. She felt the pack wavering, the initial days spiraling into dread. The Blackwood warriors were formidable, but they were unprepared, blindsided by the suddenness and ferocity of the assault. A furtive glance over her shoulder revealed the encroaching Shadowclaw forces, and her heart plummeted. They poured through the breached defenses, their numbers seemingly unending. The air hummed heavy with the reek of blood and fear, a suffocating reminder of the pack's vulnerability. Ronin arrived at the front, a force of nature incarnate. His presence alone seemed to ignite the Blackwood warriors, their spirits soaring at the sight of their alpha. He hurled himself into the fray, his midnight fur a stark shadow against the frosted ground, his roars ripping through the canopy. He fought with unbridled fury, his grief and frustration fueling a relentless, punishing onslaught. He tore through the Shadowclaw ranks, his claws leaving ragged wounds, his teeth a punishing vice. He was an engine of destruction, a lone warrior determined to protect his people, even if he had failed to safeguard Ilara. But even Ronin's might could not fully staunch the deluge. The Shadowclaw wolves were unyielding, their sheer numbers pulverizing the Blackwood defenses. The struggle intensified, a chaotic ballet of death, with the fate of the Blackwood pack hanging precariously in the balance. Grayson spotted Ronin across the carnage, his eyes narrowing with a blend of loathing and envy. He saw Ronin as everything he desperately craved, powerful, revered, the undisputed leader of his pack. He hungered to prove his own superiority, to unseat the alpha who so effortlessly commanded the loyalty of his warriors. He bowled through the Blackwood lines, his entire focus fixed on Ronin. He lunged, aiming for the alpha's throat, a desperate bid to swing the balance. The collision between Ronin and Grayson thundered across the battlefield, a brutal exhibition of strength and skill. They were an even match, their power and ferocity reflecting each other. The combat raged back and forth, neither willing to concede, each determined to claim victory. Ilara witnessed the clash, and her heart leaped into her throat. Ronin was already spread thin, parrying multiple attackers. Grayson, driven by his own demons, would be a formidable foe. She knew she had to intervene, to defend Ronin, even after his rejection. She carved through the melee, her silver fur a blur as she moved with uncanny speed. She reached Ronin just as Grayson landed a blow, staggering the alpha. "Ronin!" she called, her voice barely cutting through the din. Grayson rounded on her, his eyes blazing with rage. "Stay out of this, Meadowlight," he spat. "This is between me and the alpha." Ilara's lip curled back, her gaze locked with Grayson's. "He's my alpha, too," she growled back, "and I won't let you hurt him." The battle was far from decided, the Shadowclaw raid plunging the Blackwood pack into disarray. The outcome remained uncertain, but one thing resonated with stark clarity. The war had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Rising to defend the usual balm of pine and loamy earth scraped against Ilara's nerves, an off-key note in the forest's familiar music. She patrolled the western edge, senses heightened, a guttural growl vibrating within her. The Shadowclaw assault had been a vicious awakening, laying bare the Blackwood pack's weaknesses like flayed skin. Ronin, no doubt, paced and planned, his voice a sharp whip cracking with alpha duty. Yet Ilara grasped a truth his adherence to custom often obscured, the very pulse of the land. She halted, her palm flat against the gnarled hide of an ancient oak. The wind confided secrets in its canopy, whispers of restless soil and fleeing creatures. It wasn't merely leaves in the breeze, it was an agitated insistence in the atmosphere. Something substantial stirred in the thick underbrush, heavier than deer, more purposeful than a stray wolf. A subtle tremor resonated through the ground, betraying a sizable advancing force. Her pulse quickened to a panicked rhythm, a frantic percussion against the coming onslaught. This wasn't reconnaissance. It was a full-fledged invasion. She had to alert the others. Wheeling around, she bolted toward the packlands, her feet barely disturbing the forest floor. Bursting into the clearing's edge, She shifted, her human form dissolving into the lithe silver wolf, a blur of unmatched velocity. A piercing howl erupted, slicing through the night air, a stark, undeniable warning. The response was instant. Lights sprang to life in the cabins, doors banged open, and a surge of frantic energy coursed through the awakened pack. Ronin strode from the alpha cabin, his face a rigid mask. Jasper Thorne shadowed him, his expression tight with concern. "What is it, Ilara?" Ronin's voice, terse and clipped, betrayed a carefully concealed anxiety. "Shadowclaw," she gasped, reverting to her human form, the night's chill prickling her skin. "They're attacking from the west, in greater numbers, a flanking maneuver along the logging trails south." Ronin's jaw tightened. "How many?" Ilara swallowed, striving for composure. "Hard to say precisely, but more than we can meet head-on. They're attempting to encircle us." Ronin's gaze swept over the gathering pack members, their faces a blend of apprehension and defiance. He had concentrated on the main gate, anticipating a frontal assault, neglecting the vulnerable sides. His oversight, Jasper, reinforced the eastern gate with every warrior available. "Immediate perimeter, now," Ronin commanded, his tone regaining command. He turned back to Ilara, his expression inscrutable. "And you? And you?" "I know the trails," she said, meeting his eyes without wavering. "I know their likely breakthrough points. We can leverage the terrain." A fleeting emotion, surprise, gratitude, touched Ronin's face before disappearing behind his guarded facade. "See to it." Ilara wasted no time. She knew her role. She raced to the armory, snatching a quiver of silver-tipped arrows and a reliable bow. She wasn't a combatant, but a skilled huntress, intimately familiar with the land. Outside, turmoil reigned. Wolves shifted and snarled, eyes gleaming in the dark. Fear hung heavy, a palpable miasma. Ilara knew fear was an enemy in itself, as deadly as any blade. It had to be transmuted into determination. She noticed a cluster of younger pack members huddled, their faces drained of color. Ilara moved toward them, her voice unexpectedly resonant. "Don't cower. This is our home. They mean to steal it. We will not allow it." She raised her bow, the silver arrow catching the moonlight. "Yes, we're afraid. I am too. But we possess what they lack, unity. We have this land, and we will defend it fiercely." Her words seemed to shatter the paralysis of fear. One by one the young wolves straightened, their eyes hardening with resolve. An older woman, worry etched on her face, stepped forward. "What needs doing?" Ilara smiled, a swell of hope filling her. "Gather branches, anything that will burn. We'll raise a wall of fire. It won't stop them outright, but it will buy our warriors precious time." Within moments, the clearing buzzed with activity. Wolves scrambled to collect wood, their fear replaced by purpose. Ilara led them to a narrow ravine, a natural bottleneck in the landscape. They piled the branches high, soaking them with oil scavenged from cabin lamps. As the first shadows danced from the trees, Ilara ignited the pyre. The flames surged, casting flickering patterns across the defenders' faces. The heat radiated, pushing back the encroaching dark. A howl ripped through the night, a challenge from the approaching Shadowclaw pack. Ilara notched an arrow, her heart hammering. She wasn't a warrior in the traditional sense, but a guardian, and she would safeguard her pack, her home, with every resource she possessed. The first Shadowclaw warriors emerged from the trees, their eyes burning with malice. They paused, taken aback by the inferno, their advance momentarily checked. Ilara drew back her bow, targeting the lead wolf. This wasn't simply about survival, but about defiance, demonstrating that the Blackwood pack would not yield. The arrow streaked through the air, a silver flash in the night, striking its mark with lethal precision. The Shadowclaw warrior faltered, snarled, and collapsed. A shout of encouragement rose from the Blackwood pack. The battle was joined. Ronin appeared at her side, his face grim but determined. "Good work, Ilara," he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble against the battle's din. He drew his sword, the silver gleaming in the firelight. "Stay behind me." Ilara shook her head, refusing to be sidelined. "I fight with you," she stated, drawing another arrow. Her rejection still echoed, a tender spot beneath the surface, but personal pain was irrelevant now. Now was the time to defend. A leader's awakening, the air crackled with the scent of pine and blood, a metallic tang that stung Ronin's nostrils. He moved through the fray like a phantom, each strike of his claws a precise dance of death against the encroaching Shadowclaws. Yet his gaze kept drifting, pulled against his will towards the eastern edge of the barrier, where flames danced under Ilara's direction. He saw her silhouetted against the fire, not as the gentle healer he'd known, but a figure forged in the crucible of battle. Her voice, clear and strong, cut through the din of war, directing the younger warriors, guiding them to exploit the Shadowclaw's weaknesses. He watched as she leaped over a fallen log, a surge of earth magic erupting from her hands, sending a cluster of Shadowclaws sprawling. Ronin felt a jolt, a painful twist in his gut. He'd dismissed her, branded her unsuitable for the harsh realities of pack life. He had seen only her kindness, her empathy, and had foolishly mistaken it for weakness. Now, he witnessed her courage, her strategic mind, her unwavering commitment to protecting the Blackwood territory, qualities he had desperately failed to recognize, blinded by his own rigid expectations. A Shadowclaw warrior, larger and more brutal than the others, broke through the line, heading straight for Ilara. Ronin surged forward, a roar building in his chest, but she was already moving. With a speed that defied her slender frame, she sidestepped the attack, grabbing a discarded spear. The weapon wasn't traditionally hers, yet in her hands, it became an extension of her will, a conduit for her power. She thrust it forward, striking the Shadowclaw at a vulnerable point beneath its armored hide. The creature staggered, momentarily stunned. Ronin reached them just as the Shadowclaw recovered. He slammed into it with the force of a battering ram, sending it crashing into the forest floor. He stood over it, claws extended, ready to deliver the killing blow, but hesitated. Ilara stood beside him, her eyes blazing with an intensity he had never seen before. "Leave him," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "He can be questioned." Ronin lowered his claws, surprised by her practicality. He'd been so consumed by rage, by the primal urge to protect her, that he hadn't considered taking prisoners. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the gentle healer, not the rejected mate, but a leader, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. "The eastern flank is weakening," she said, her gaze already sweeping across the battlefield. "They're focusing their attacks there. They think they can break through." Ronin nodded, his mind racing. He had made a critical error, focusing his defenses on the north and west, underestimating the Shadowclaw's cunning. Ilara's connection to the land, her intuitive understanding of the forest, had revealed their strategy. He'd been so caught up in his own preconceived notions, so burdened by the weight of his responsibilities, that he had failed to see the strength and wisdom that had been standing right beside him. "What do you suggest?" he asked, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. He, the alpha, asking for advice from the woman he had publicly rejected. Ilara pointed towards a narrow ravine, hidden by a thicket of trees. That ravine. It's a natural bottleneck. If we can funnel them through there, we can cut off their advance. Ronin studied the ravine, his sharp eyes assessing the terrain. She was right. It was the perfect choke point. He cursed himself for not seeing it sooner. "I'll take the warriors from the northern flank," he said, his voice regaining its authority. "You reinforce the barrier. Keep the flames high. We can't let them break through." Ilara nodded, her eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, something he couldn't quite decipher. Forgiveness? Understanding? Or perhaps just a warrior's focus, a shared determination to defend their home. Together, they moved, a symphony of action, coordinating their forces, bolstering the defenses. Ronin led his warriors through the trees, their movements swift and silent, a pack of wolves hunting in the night. He positioned them on either side of the ravine, hidden amongst the rocks and trees, waiting for the Shadowclaws to fall into their trap. The Shadowclaws came in waves, their eyes glowing with a feral hunger. They charged into the ravine, eager to break through the Blackwood defenses. But as they advanced, Ronin gave the signal. The Blackwood warriors sprang from their hiding places, attacking from both sides. Ronin fought with a ferocity born of regret and determination. He moved like a whirlwind, his claws tearing through flesh and bone. He felt a surge of power, a connection to the land, to his pack, to Ilara. He wasn't just fighting for his territory, he was fighting for his future, for a chance to redeem himself in her eyes. He saw Ilara at the edge of the ravine, her hands raised, chanting an ancient incantation. The ground beneath the Shadowclaw's feet began to tremble. Vines erupted from the earth, ensnaring their limbs, holding them in place. The Blackwood warriors surged forward, finishing them off with swift, decisive strikes. The Shadowclaw attack faltered, then broke. They turned and fled, their tails between their legs, leaving behind a trail of bodies and broken weapons. The Blackwood pack had held. They had defended their territory. Ronin stood panting, his body aching, but his spirit soaring. He looked towards Ilara, his heart pounding in his chest. She stood bathed in the firelight, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes shining with triumph. He knew, in that moment, that he had been a fool. He had rejected a treasure, a strength, a love that he could never hope to find again. And he knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to earn her forgiveness. The burden of leadership suddenly seemed lighter, not because the responsibility had lessened, but because he finally saw that he wasn't meant to carry it alone. He started towards her, his steps hesitant, unsure of what to say, what to do. But before he could reach her, a messenger arrived, his face pale with fear. "Alpha," he gasped. "They've attacked the southern border, a much larger force than before." Wounded pride and unnatural quiet blanketed the southern border, a stillness that grated on Ilara's nerves like nails on stone. She patrolled, every sense heightened, the silence itself a tangible threat. Ronin's scouts spoke of escalating Shadowclaw presence, yet their patience felt like a cruel taunt. Her fingers tightened around the sword hilt, the cold steel a stark comfort against mounting anxiety. The forest exploded. A bestial roar tore through the quiet, followed by the sickening impact of bodies against the earth. Shadowclaws surged from the tree line, a tide of savagery aimed squarely at Blackwood territory. Ronin, a silver-eyed tempest, carved a path through the onslaught. He moved with impossible swiftness, a blur of motion dismantling the invaders. a living shield against the encroaching darkness. At the forefront, Grayson Stone's face was a mask of feral delight, his gaze fixed on Ronin. Larger, his physique unnaturally amplified, he exuded a desperate ambition, a dark hunger mirrored in Lyra's predatory stare. A yearning for dominance, for recognition. They collided, a brutal ballet of power and finesse. The air vibrated with the force of their blows, the ground trembling underfoot. Despite his training, Ronin showed the strain, the Shadowclaw's relentless assault chipping away at his defenses. A growl resonated deep within Ilara. She couldn't stand by and watch him fall. She dove into the chaos, her blade a flash of silver against the encroaching gloom, her actions propelled by fidelity and a love she had suppressed. A Shadowclaw lunged at Ronin's unprotected back, claws extended for a killing strike. Distracted by Grayson's relentless pressure, Ronin was vulnerable. Instinct took over. Ilara hurled herself into the path of the attack, absorbing the blow. Agony flared as claws ripped through her shoulder, yet she stifled any cry. In a fluid motion, she spun, plunging her sword into the attacker's heart. Ronin stumbled, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Ilara! What were you thinking?" he roared, his voice a mix of fury and dread. "Defending what's ours," she gasped, the words ragged with pain. "Defending you." Grayson, seizing the moment, capitalized on Ronin's distraction. He raked his claws across Ronin's chest, drawing a crimson line. Ronin faltered, his breath catching in ragged gasps. Ignoring the fire in her shoulder, Ilara surged forward, her sword a blinding arc. She forced Grayson to retreat, breaking his attack on Ronin. "Get him to safety," she snapped at nearby Blackwood warriors. "I'll hold them off." Pale and shaken, guilt etched on his features, Ronin was pulled away by his pack, his gaze locked on Ilara. He wanted to argue, to remain and fight beside her, but knew her assessment was correct. He was compromised, a hindrance. Ilara faced the Shadowclaw onslaught alone, her eyes burning with defiance. She was a whirlwind of deadly grace, each movement precise and savage. A protector, a force to be reckoned with. Emboldened by her apparent isolation, the Shadowclaws pressed their attack, their numbers overwhelming. Grayson, consumed by rage, rejoined the fray, an obsessive darkness blazing in his eyes. "Lyra will claim your head, Meadowlight," he snarled. "She will break you and all you cherish. Lyra's ambitions will be her downfall," Ilara countered, her voice unwavering. "She underestimates the strength of the Blackwood pack, and she certainly underestimates me." The battle raged, the forest floor a macabre tapestry of fallen bodies. Inspired by Ilara's bravery, the Blackwood warriors fought with renewed ferocity, blunting the Shadowclaw advance. Slowly, inexorably, the advantage shifted. A frustrated growl split the air. From the shadows, Lyra observed the disintegration of her meticulous plans. Her forces were wavering, her triumph slipping from her grasp. "Fall back," she snarled, her command sharp with bitterness. "Regroup, we will return." Disappointment etched on his face, Grayson reluctantly obeyed. The Shadowclaws, their spirit broken, melted back into the forest, vanishing into the shadows they emerged from. Ilara watched them retreat, her chest heaving, her body screaming in protest. The victory was costly, but it was victory nonetheless. She had shielded her pack, protected Ronin, and reaffirmed her strength. As the last of the Shadowclaws vanished, a wave of exhaustion crashed over her. The adrenaline waned, leaving her raw and vulnerable. She swayed, her vision blurring at the edges. Blackwood warriors rushed to her aid, their faces etched with concern. They gently supported her, their touch reverent. They had witnessed her power, her valor, her unwavering devotion. They had witnessed the true alpha she was destined to become. "We need to get you to the healers," one of the warriors said, his voice tight with anxiety. Ilara nodded, allowing them to guide her away. As she was led away, she glanced back to where Ronin had stood. She saw him there, supported by 2 warriors, his gaze fixed on her. His expression, an enigma of gratitude, guilt, and something indefinable. Lurking in the concealment of the trees, hatred blazed in Lyra's eyes. Her strategy had backfired, her army defeated. But she was not one for surrender. She would mend, she would rebuild, and she would be back. And next time, she would not belittle the prowess of Ilara Meadowlight. This time, she escaped with her pride wounded. Next time, the forest would run red with blood. Confessions in the dark Ilara inhaled, the sharp fragrance of evergreens and wet soil a constant companion on her dawn patrol. Yesterday's adrenaline had curdled into a dull ache, a phantom limb reminding her of the Shadowclaw assault. Victory tasted like ash. Every rustle in the undergrowth, each snapping twig, sparked a fresh wave of apprehension. She visually swept the forest's edge, every nerve attuned to the faintest trace of the enemy's presence. The moon, a mere fingernail clipping in the sky, offered scant illumination, stretching the familiar trees into grotesque parodies. Meanwhile, inside the pack house, Ronin's solitude amplified the echoes of the previous night's bedlam. Jasper's ministrations burned as he swabbed a slice on Ronin's forearm, a memento of his brief, brutal encounter with Grayson Stone. The pain was trivial, a fleeting distraction from the inner turmoil that clawed at him. He couldn't shake the image of Ilara intercepting a blow intended for him, a blow that could have extinguished her. The scene played on repeat in his mind, each iteration more searing than the last. "Easy, Alpha," Jasper murmured, dabbing antiseptic. "You're twitchier than a kit," Ronin grunted, eyes fixed on the floorboards. "I should have anticipated him." No one did. Stone's devious, I'll grant him that. But our warriors stood firm, fought with heart. Ilara fought with heart, Ronin corrected, his voice weighted with unspoken emotion. Jasper's hand paused. "She certainly did. Quite remarkable." He carefully skirted deeper implications, but the unspoken hung heavy in the air. Ilara, the rejected mate, had displayed courage that dwarfed them all. Ronin swallowed against the lump in his throat, the guilt a noxious taste. "I need to speak with her." "She's patrolling. Best to let her find some peace, Ronin. Time to breathe." "I don't deserve her mercy," Ronin confessed, the words barely audible. "Perhaps not, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't seek it. Don't let pride be the ruin of this pack, Ronin. Or your own joy." Jasper secured the bandage. "Get some rest, Alpha. You'll require your strength." Ronin remained motionless, the crisp white of the bandage a stark contrast against his skin. Rest was a distant prospect. He needed to explain, to atone, to plead for absolution. But how could he meet her gaze after the pain he had inflicted? How could he seek pardon when he was still imprisoned by his own self-loathing? As dawn bled hues of rose and pearl across the horizon, Ronin discovered Ilara poised at the wood's outermost fringe. Her back was to him, her posture rigid, her gaze lost in the distance. He approached cautiously, his footsteps deadened by the yielding earth. "Ilara," he said, his voice rough-edged. She didn't turn, Ronin. He halted a few paces behind her, the distance feeling like an unbridgeable divide. I wanted to thank you for your actions last night. There's no need. I simply did what was required. No, you imperiled yourself for me, after all that has transpired. Silence descended, punctuated only by the dawn chorus of birds. Ilara finally pivoted, her gaze meeting his. Her eyes were guarded, hesitant, yet within their depths he glimpsed something else, a profound sorrow that mirrored his own. "Why, Ronin? Why did you do it?" she asked, her tone soft yet resolute. He recoiled as though struck. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of the bond, of surrendering control, of becoming someone unrecognizable." He raked a hand through his hair, his agitation palpable. "I've always shouldered the burden of strength, of authority, to safeguard the pack. The bonded it seemed a vulnerability, a chink in my armor I couldn't afford. So instead, you chose to wound me." "It wasn't intended to unfold this way," he implored, his voice cracking. "My thought was if I rejected you, the bond would shatter. I could revert to what I was. And did that occur?" He shook his head, shame engulfing him. "No, it only amplified the damage, for everyone involved. You publicly shamed me, Ronin. You rejected me before the entire pack. You made me feel worthless." "I am aware," he said, his voice thick with regret. "And I am deeply, truly sorry. I was misguided, Ilara. I underestimated your resilience, your bravery, your very essence." Tears threatened to spill from Ilara's eyes, but she fought them back. "Why this confession, now? Because I must purge this truth. Because I can no longer endure this charade. I was a fool, Ilara. A blind, arrogant fool. And I am unworthy of your grace, yet I implore you to grant it. Regardless." He took a tentative step forward, his hand extending, then faltering, hovering in the air. "Please, Ilara. I beg you." Ilara studied him, her expression enigmatic. The ache in her eyes mirrored his own. He saw the devastation he had wreaked, the trust he had demolished. He saw not the woman he had rejected, but the one who had shielded him from death. "I am at a loss for words, Ronin," she whispered, her voice tremulous. "I require time to process, to reflect." "Understood," he said, his voice barely audible. "Take all the time necessary." He turned to leave, the weight of his sins dragging him down. "Ronin," Ilara called. He stopped, his pulse hammering. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for your honesty." He nodded, speechless, and retreated, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts. Dawn had broken fully, yet the shadows within him persisted. He had unburdened himself of his fears, his failings, his transgressions. But was it enough? Had he uttered the words that truly mattered? Only time would reveal whether Ilara could offer forgiveness, whether they could ever rediscover their connection, and whether, with the persistent shadow of the Shadowclaw threat, they would even be granted the opportunity. The choice, the musk of evergreens, and the loamy scent of upturned earth clung to Ilara's coat as she patrolled the Blackwood border. Even the familiarity of the terrain offered scant comfort against the anxiety churning within. The very air seemed to vibrate with foreboding. A drawn breath before a downpour. Ever since the Shadowclaw assault, she'd carried this premonition, a nagging sense that tranquility was a fragile illusion, that something more sinister was on the horizon. However, the external threat wasn't the sole source of her disquiet. There was Ronin. His raw, unguarded confession lingered, a persistent echo in her thoughts. The bond terrified him, the exposure it demanded. He feared her. Yet, beneath the dread, she glimpsed a mirroring of her own intense yearning. He had pleaded for absolution, his voice a husky rumble that ignited a shiver along her spine. Forgiveness a monumental ask, after the public shaming, the dismissive gesture that had left her spirit bruised and aching. She discovered him near the training grounds, the twilight sun splashing the clearing with vibrant shades of apricot and violet. A solitary figure, his broad back taut as he observed the younger wolves sparring. An electric tension radiated from him, betraying the internal storm he battled. Sensing her presence, he turned, his gaze usually so keen and assertive now shadowed by profound weariness. "Ilara," he acknowledged, his voice roughened. "I hadn't anticipated you being here." "I needed to speak with you," she stated, her voice unwavering despite the frantic beat of her heart. She lessened the gap between them, halting mere paces away, close enough to discern the distinctive aroma of cedar and pine clinging to him, near enough to witness the worry lines carved around his eyes. "You shared your fears with me, Ronin. You explained why you pushed me away." He averted his gaze, his jaw tightening. "I shouldn't have burdened you with that knowledge." "Burdened me?" she challenged, a brittle laugh escaping her. "Ronin, you humiliated me before the entire pack. You severed the bond or attempted to. And you think a sliver of truth is a burden compared to that?" He winced, a flicker of raw anguish in his expression offering a vulnerable peek into his soul. "I know I wounded you, Ilara, more deeply than I can articulate. I regret it with every breath I take." "Regret is insufficient," she countered, her tone hardening. "You spoke of fearing the bond, the exposure. You claimed needing strength for the pack, that feelings were a weakness. But Ronin, genuine strength isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about confronting them, embracing them, and choosing the right course regardless." He remained mute, his eyes fixed on the earth. "You face a decision," Ilara continued, softer now, but no less resolute. "You can continue to shield yourself behind your duty, behind your anxieties, and exist in isolated fortitude. Or you can welcome the bond, welcome me, and confront whatever challenges arise together." At last he lifted his head, his eyes seeking hers with palpable intensity. "And if I choose you, Ilara? What if I fail you regardless? What if my feelings for you endanger the pack?" "You won't," she affirmed, her voice ringing with conviction. "Because my strength will bolster yours, and yours will fortify mine. We'll face it as one. We always have." She took a step closer, her hand rising to touch his face. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips, the bristly stubble a gentle rasp against her palm. "But you must choose, Ronin. You can't remain half committed, half withdrawn. You can't continue to plead in private while denying in public. It's unjust to me and to yourself." He shut his eyes, his breathing becoming ragged and shallow. The quiet stretched, heavy with unspoken words, with years of suppressed longing and regret. The sun vanished below the horizon, deepening the shadows within the clearing. Finally, he opened his eyes, his gaze unwavering, intense. I require time, Ilara. Time to reflect, to process everything." She offered a nod, a subtle dip in her spirits. "Take the time you need, Ronin, but don't dawdle. The pack requires a strong alpha, and I deserve an honest mate." She lowered her hand and turned away, the weight of his uncertainty heavy on her shoulders. Later, under the moon's silvery wash over the territory, Ilara instinctively found her way to Elder Willowbrook's dwelling. The elder sat on her porch, her aged eyes gleaming like distant stars in the moonlight. "Troubled, child?" Willowbrook inquired, her voice a gravelly kindness. Ilara sighed, settling onto the steps beside her. "Ronin is struggling, Elder. He says he needs time to choose between what is his duty and Maya." Willowbrook offered a quiet chuckle. "The mantle of leadership is a weighty one, child. It can obscure the vision of even the strongest wolves. But is it fair to me?" Ilara questioned, her voice laced with frustration. "To be kept suspended, held at bay, while he decides my worthiness of the risk?" Willowbrook reached out, her wrinkled fingers surprisingly firm as they enveloped Ilara's hand. "Trust your instincts, Ilara. Your heart is steadfast, your mind discerning. You know what is truly right for you. Don't allow fear or doubt to cloud your judgment." "But what if I err?" Ilara whispered, barely audible. "What if I place my faith in him, and he breaks me anew?" "Then you shall endure," Willowbrook replied, her tone unwavering. "You are a Blackwood wolf, Ilara Meadowlight. Strong, resilient, capable of achieving whatever you resolve. Even if you are wounded, even if you suffer betrayal, you will rise again. But don't permit the apprehension of pain to rob you of joy. Don't permit Ronin's past mistakes to define your future happiness. Follow your heart, child. It will lead you true." Ilara squeezed the elder's hand, her heart overflowing with cautious optimism. The moon bathed the clearing in its ethereal glow, a tacit promise of fresh starts, of trials to come, and of decisions that would forge the destiny of the Blackwood pack and her own. She understood, with a profound certainty, that the future remained uncertain. Yet she stood ready to meet it head-on, whatever the cost. Ultimately, the choice lay with Ronin. Her life, however, her direction, remained firmly within her control. Final stand pine and loam couldn't mask the premonition gnawing at Ilara as she guarded the southern border. A leaden stillness saturated the air, more than just a prelude to a coming squall. Deep within her, she sensed the shadow of another Shadowclaw incursion, heavier, somehow deliberate. A distant growl, quickly swelling into a chorus of savage barks and splintering wood, confirmed her fears. The trees became streaks as wolves poured from the tree line, eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. No longer were they testing the edges. This was a full-blown assault, aimed squarely at the heart of their defenses. And she was the target. Ronin's mental voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the din. "Ilara, retreat. They're after you." She refused. He still underestimated her, still saw the girl he'd once spurned. He didn't grasp the strength simmering within, the steel forged in the flames of his rejection. She would not yield. Not any longer. The first rank slammed into her, a savage tide of fang and claw. Ilara answered with her own shift, unleashing the wolf within, a ferocious guardian roaring to meet the challenge. She met their onslaught head-on, claws raking, teeth bared, a blur of silver fur defying the encroaching gloom. Ronin arrived like a thunderclap, a black hurricane tearing through the enemy ranks. His power was palpable, a wave of raw force that scattered weaker combatants. Ruthless efficiency marked his every move, each strike precise, lethal. But his gaze kept snapping back to Ilara, his worry a tangible presence amidst the carnage. "Get behind me!" he roared, his voice a low, commanding rumble. With a snarl, Ilara shouldered past him, intercepting a massive brute attempting to outflank him. "I don't require your protection, Ronin. Fight alongside me, or stand aside." Their eyes met. A silent clash of wills played out in the eye of the storm. Briefly, she glimpsed something beyond duty in his expression. Respect? Understanding? It vanished in an instant. He lunged forward, matching her savagery, their movements merging into a seamless ballet of destruction. Back to back, they fought as one, their combined might amplified by the lingering bond between them. A potent force that carved a path through the Shadowclaw horde. The wolves hesitated, their initial ferocity replaced by wary uncertainty. But this was no random raid. This had been planned. From the edge of the fray, Grayson watched, etched with doubt. Lyra's command had been absolute. Capture Ilara, alive if possible, but at all costs. He'd obeyed, driven by his hopeless devotion. But the intensity of this assault, the mounting losses, felt wrong. Personal. He noticed Lyra's second-in-command, Bregan, a scarred veteran, barking orders. "Why this fixation on her?" Grayson demanded, his voice swallowed by the clamor. "We're bleeding wolves. We should be striking at their alpha." Bregan's lip curled. "Those are Lyra's directives. Are you questioning her?" Grayson's fists clenched. He wasn't challenging her authority, but her reasoning. This reeked of vendetta, not strategy. He saw Ronin and Ilara devastate another cluster of Shadowclaw fighters, their connection a visible power, a shimmering aura that pushed outwards. Again, he addressed Bregan, his tone strained. "This is insanity. We can't prevail like this. Tell Lyra we must alter our approach." Bregan shoved him, eyes gleaming with malevolence. "Lyra needs no counsel from you, Grayson. She knows her course. Your place is on the front lines, not second-guessing her decisions." Grayson wavered, trapped between his allegiance to Lyra and his mounting disquiet. He couldn't shake the sensation of being manipulated, a pawn in a game he didn't comprehend. But he was a soldier, and duty called. He returned to the fray, a cold dread settling in his stomach. A palpable change rippled through the Shadowclaw ranks. They were drawing back, reorganizing. Not retreating, but maneuvering. Ilara searched the woods, senses heightened. It wasn't about territory. It wasn't about weakening the Blackwood pack. It was about her. "Ronin," she breathed, her voice urgent. "They aren't attacking the pack. They're after me. They're trying to seize me." Ronin's gaze narrowed, sweeping the carnage. He saw it too, the subtle but unmistakable shift in focus, the way they were being funneled toward the edge of the forest, away from the heart of the packlands. "Lyra," he spat, the name a curse. The truth dawned. This wasn't about land or power. It was about jealousy, Lyra's warped obsession with him. Ilara was the prize. He seized Ilara's arm, his grip surprisingly gentle. "We have to get you back to safety. Now." Ilara shook her head, breaking free. "No, I'm not retreating. I am done running. We end this here." She felt the Shadowclaw pack closing the net, their eyes burning with anticipation. They craved her, needed her. Why? A wave of vertigo crashed over her, followed by a sharp spike of pain in her skull. Fragmented images surfaced. Lyra, encircled by Shadowclaw elders, chanting in a guttural tongue a dark, swirling energy swirling around her as sacrifice. She stumbled, disoriented. Ronin caught her, face tight with worry. "Ilara, what is it?" "Lyra," she gasped, fighting for clarity. "She's scheming. Something immense. She requires me for it." Ronin's jaw tightened. "Then we deny her the opportunity." He shifted, his wolf form looming over her, radiating protectiveness. "Stay behind me. They won't touch you." Ilara transformed, matching his ferocity, her silver fur shimmering under the fading light. "We fight together, Ronin. Always." The Shadowclaw forces surged forward, a final, desperate assault. Ronin and Ilara met their charge head-on, their bond a bulwark against the advancing darkness. They would hold their ground, fight for their pack, and fight for their future. They would make their stand here. A united pack, the air thrummed, not with lingering dark magic, but a tangible trepidation that prickled the fur of every wolf in Blackwood territory. Ilara patrolled the southern edge, the familiar scent of pine and loam offering little comfort against the disquiet churning within her. The memory of Lyra's frigid touch lingered, a chilling reminder of the calculated malice in her eyes, surpassed only by the echo of Ronin's initial rejection, a wound Lyra had so skillfully amplified. Could she ever truly earn the pack's trust, despite her fight alongside their alpha? Jasper Thorne appeared beside her, his usually cheerful countenance clouded with worry. "He's a whirlwind of anxiety, Ilara, snapping at phantoms. I haven't witnessed him this tormented since the Red Moon catastrophe." Ilara sighed, her breath blooming into fleeting clouds. "The pack's weight rests squarely on his shoulders, Jasper. It's a crushing load. But was it as crushing as the burden of his conflicted affections?" She banished the thought, refocusing on the patrol. The border demanded vigilance, and succumbing to worry about Ronin's inner turmoil wouldn't reinforce their defenses. Deep within the Blackwood settlement, Ronin addressed the assembled pack. A suffocating silence descended, every wolf expectant, observant, their eyes mirroring a blend of hope and uncertainty. He'd summoned them. He had to rectify his mistakes, not only for Ilara but for the very heart of the pack. Doubt, like a creeping blight, had festered after his impulsive denial. Lyra had come disturbingly close to shattering their unity. That would not stand. He surveyed the assembled faces, the familiar countenances of warriors, mothers, and pups. He saw their unspoken questions, their barely concealed anxieties. He noticed Jasper lingering at the periphery, his brow a knot of concern. And then there was Elder Willowbrook, her ageless gaze radiating knowing patience. A subtle nod, a silent encouragement passed from her. Inhaling deeply, Ronin allowed his inner wolf to surge forward. His voice, amplified by his alpha authority, reverberated across the clearing. "I have erred," he began, his words stark and genuine. "Committed errors that have sown discord and pain within our ranks, errors that jeopardized our very existence." He paused, his gaze encompassing the multitude before him. "My rejection of Ilara was such an error. It stemmed from fear, a misguided sense of obligation, and a blindness to the genuine strength and devotion she possesses." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ronin raised a hand, silencing their unrest. "Lyra Shadowclaw sought to capitalize on that fracture, to turn my failings against us. She targeted Ilara not merely for her power, but because she recognized that division weakens a pack." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to resonate. Yet Ilara stood defiant. "She fought for us, for our home, for our future. She risked everything, despite the pain I inflicted." He stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Ilara as she entered the clearing, drawn by the resonance of his voice. The fading sunlight painted her pelt in fiery shades of gold and russet, lending her an almost otherworldly presence. "Ilara Meadowlight," Ronin declared, his voice ringing with utter sincerity. "You embody courage, strength, and unwavering loyalty, and you are my chosen mate." A collective gasp swept through the gathering. Ronin disregarded it, his attention solely fixed on Ilara. Before all assembled, I acknowledge you, claim you, and pledge you my heart, my fealty, and my unending protection. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of both submission and respect. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive, before finally shattering. A young pup, barely able to shift, yipped with unrestrained excitement, its tail a blur of motion. Then a lone wolf howled, a drawn-out, mournful sound that swiftly transitioned into a joyous cry. Soon, the entire pack erupted in a symphony of howls, barks, and cheers. They surged forward, enveloping Ilara and Ronin, their faces illuminated by relief and acceptance. Elder Willowbrook approached Ilara, her eyes trained, brimming with warmth. You have shown them the way, child. Shown them the true meaning of being Blackwood. She placed a hand on Ilara's cheek. He is a simpleton, that one, she said, gesturing towards Ronin, but he is your simpleton. Guide him wisely. The celebration commenced in earnest. Bonfires roared, casting writhing shadows across the clearing. Laughter erupted, intermingling with the tempting aroma of roasting game. Wolves feasted, danced with abandon, and engaged in playful scuffles, their joy unbridled. Ilara found herself caught in the current of festivities, surrounded by well-wishers, offering congratulations, and extending apologies for their past hesitations. Ronin observed her from the edge of the throng, a genuine smile lighting his features. He witnessed the authentic Bertal, warmth in her gaze, the effortless way she interacted with the pack. He had nearly lost her, not to Lyra's malevolence, but to his own hubris and apprehension. He approached her tentatively, his heart pounding against his ribs. Ilara, he murmured, his voice barely audible above the celebratory din. She turned to face him, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. Ronin. He reached out, gently enfolding her hand in his. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for your forgiveness. Thank you for defending us. Thank you for being you. Ilara squeezed his hand in return, her thumb tracing circles on his skin. There is nothing to excuse, Ronin. We are all fallible. What matters is that we learn and evolve. She glanced around at the reveling pack, their faces aglow with elation. This is what is truly significant, Ronin. This is what we fight to protect. He drew her closer, wrapping his arms securely around her waist. I love you, Ilara, he confessed, his breath warming her ear. I should have spoken these words long ago. Ilara nestled into his embrace, her heart overflowing with love and contentment. I love you too, Ronin, she whispered, her voice brimming with emotion. They remained entwined for a long moment, lost in their private world amidst the surrounding merriment. The pack around them blurred into insignificance, their voices a distant drone. Only they mattered, their love a guiding light in the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, Ronin led Ilara away from the festivities, venturing deeper into the woods. He guided her to a secluded glade bathed in the cool glow of the moon, a place he had always considered his personal sanctuary. He gazed at Ilara, her silver fur shimmering under the lunar light, and acknowledged that this haven, like his heart, now belonged to her as well. He knelt before her, retrieving a small, intricately carved box from his pocket. Inside rested a dull necklace, fashioned from interwoven strands of silver and blackwood, adorned with a single flawless moonstone pendant. This has been passed down through generations of Blackwood alphas, he explained, his voice hushed with reverence. It symbolizes the inseparable bond between the alpha and his mate, the very strength and unity of our pack. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with love and fervent hope. "Will you wear it, Ilara? Will you be my partner as we guide our pack into the future?" Tears welled up in Ilara's eyes as she nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Ronin. I will." He gently placed the necklace around her neck, the smooth metal a reassuring weight against her skin. As he fastened the clasp, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of pure energy through their bodies. He rose, drawing her close once more. Their lips met in a kiss that resonated with both tenderness and fervent passion, a promise of a future bound by love, unwavering loyalty, and profound devotion. The moon reigned supreme in the heavens, casting its silvery radiance upon the united Blackwood pack, a living testament to their resilience, their enduring strength, and the infinite power of love.